David Johnson, Professor of Medicine and Chief of Gastroenterology at Eastern Virginia Medical School in Norfolk, Virginia. Well, adenoma detection rate has really been the definition of quality colonoscopy over the last several years. Recognition comes particularly driven by the folks at Kaiser Permanente, where the identity of an adenoma detection rate correlated with a reduction in colon cancer disease itself and colon cancer-related mortality. Well, kudos to Dr. Doug Corley and his group for taking this a step further in evaluating a training tool which they've developed and now tested and validated over the course of their institution that involved a 30-minute interactive, remotely accessible online training program that included education on the value of colonoscopy, in particularly why the missed rates were evident, in particular in focusing on techniques and things that potentially may drive missed adenomas and cell-ulcerated lesions. They then involved Dr. Douglas Rex from Indiana and looked at very detailed analysis of withdrawal technique. I love it when Doug lectures on anything as it relates to colonoscopy, but in this one he talks particularly about the development of the idea of a three-dimensional shape lumen, where you look at all areas of the lumen and work the folds, is what he says, go back and forth, looking at everything to expose and in particular explore and expose the proximal side of the folds. The aim small, miss small is what he says, is look for, again, targeted lesions that you're trying to miss. If you're going to miss something, it's going to be very small. Again, your range of miss then becomes very narrow. You're not going to miss big lesions. And in particular, these are the concepts that really fundamentally drive the examination to be the best possible examination, and critical that we do that. But that was a particular tenet of Doug's. Then they also involved Dr. Gautamalankara Raju from MD Anderson, who provided several excellent videos, particularly looking at amplification of imaging via mucosal caps, indigo carmine, and particularly with injection techniques and narrowband imaging, in particular focusing on flat lesions, so adenomas or cell-ulcerated lesions, particularly the development of defining not only that they're there, but defining the adequate margin for adequate resection. And then they also then talk about some of the pure concepts of what quality colonoscopy means and how these programs methodologically make an emphasis of patient enhancement, and prioritization of quality is really a key. With that in mind, they explored this in their own system. So Kaiser Permanente, they looked at 100% participation, 21 endoscopy centers, 86 eligible colonoscopists. They all had to meet certain criteria. The age for screening and examinations was greater than 50 or greater. And then they employed this and then followed those patients' success ratios over the course of relative to what the endoscopist's performance characteristics were. They broke out high performance endoscopists for adenoma detection rate at 29.2% or greater, and less than that is lower, although the ranges were considerably more expanded on that. But nonetheless, what they found is after the examination of this 30-minute video, there was an immediate absolute adenoma detection increase across all the colonoscopists of 3.13%, with an estimated relative risk reduction for colon cancer prevention within the next 3 years of 12.5%. So that's a sizable number when you talk about a adenoma detection rate of 3.1%, a relative risk reduction of 12.5% over the next 3 years across all. But in particular for the lower adenoma detection endoscopists, there was nearly a 4.9% immediate absolute increase in adenoma detection. And this would equate to about a 19.6% risk reduction over the next 3 years. For the higher adenoma detectors, there was a smaller 0.73 absolute risk reduction, but this would still estimate to be a 2.9%, nearly 3% risk reduction over the next 3 years. In particular, for the lower end adenoma detectors, the risk estimates were dramatic. If you were able to increase your adenoma detection rate by 10% or more, there was a 55% risk reduction for development of colon cancer. And recognized in this study, there were some adenoma detectors that were in the 23% range. So again, in the lower adenoma detection range, these were dramatically better, but nonetheless across all categories of adenoma detection. So the absolute increase was evident across the system. The increase was evident not only for the lower end, which was strikingly higher, but even for the higher end adenoma detectors, What's the advantage of this? Well, it's a 30-minute program. It's online, ready to do. It's free. I would encourage not only the endoscopist to do this, but get your endoscopy team to do this. I think the nurses and the nursing assistants involved in the procedures, clearly more eyes on the screen, the better. The more that they become engaged and the more they become educated, I think that enhances. The relative downside of this, none. This is a top issue, I think, for quality improvement. I would put this on the screen of every system, office, departments. This is something that should be a very easy no-brainer for patients, for people to use, colonoscopists to use in their team. The absolute risk reductions, I think, are dramatic, and ultimately it's a patient satisfaction because we're really trying to prevent cancer. So here the not so good got much better, but even the good got better. Who's the benefactor? It's our patients. Please let them get better too. Dr. David Johnson, please take a look at this. It's an incredibly valuable tool, and I would put it high on your prioritization list for quality improvement. Thanks again for listening.